What if I told you that in Wyoming, people have disappeared in places so remote that search teams struggled to even reach them, but also in places so open and familiar that they should have been found almost immediately? Wyoming is one of the most rugged and diverse states in North America, filled with mountains, valleys, ranchlands, national parks, forests, and wide-open wilderness where the terrain can turn dangerous fast. But this chapter reveals something even more unsettling than the landscape itself. A strange balance of missing men and women, cases spread across decades, and disappearances where abduction, accident, exposure, and wilderness survival all seem possible, but none of them fully explain what happened. And as we move through these cases, keep one question in mind until the very end. Why do so many of these people vanish close to roads, trails, camps, vehicles, or family members, yet leave behind almost nothing that can tell us where they went? The first case is Janet Federer, a 6-year-old girl who disappeared in 1948 near Cheyenne, Wyoming. Janet was playing with the family dog on a ranch when she suddenly vanished. Her family searched, authorities were called, and one of the most disturbing details came early. The dog reportedly returned without Janet, and some said the dog behaved strangely, as if it knew something had happened. Searchers combed the area, and the next morning a local rancher flying his plane spotted what he thought was a large dog in a creek bed. When he landed and looked closer, it was Janet. She was alive, but badly scratched, bruised, cold, and exposed after a long night outside. The strange part is not only that she survived, but that she was found roughly 10 miles from where she disappeared, a distance that seems almost impossible for a 6-year-old girl to cover under those conditions. Some searchers believe she could not have traveled that far alone. So the first loop begins. If Janet did not walk there herself, how did she get there? The next case is Frank Norris, a 46-year-old hunter who disappeared in 1949 in the Gros Ventre region northwest of Pinedale. Frank and his wife were on a hunting trip, traveling by horse into rugged terrain near the Failer Ranch. One day, Frank went out alone while his wife remained in camp. He never returned. Searchers later found his horse still saddled, with the reins tied together, and Frank's rifle was reportedly still in the scabbard with a full magazine. That detail matters. If Frank had been attacked by an animal or surprised by danger, why was the rifle still with the horse? If he had voluntarily dismounted, why tie the reins in a way that would limit the horse's movement and then leave his firearm behind? The author walks through possible explanations: illness, accident, foul play, being struck, becoming injured, but none of them fit perfectly. The terrain was vast and remote, but Frank was not inexperienced. His case becomes even stranger because he was later listed in some accounts as deceased, even though his body was never found. And that raises another unsettling question. How often do missing people become closed cases on paper while the actual mystery remains untouched? Then comes Fran Weaver, a 56-year-old woman who disappeared in 1960 near Goff Creek Lodge, close to Yellowstone and Cody, Wyoming. Fran had recently become connected to the lodge and was staying in the area when she left her cabin for a hike and never came back. Her friend became concerned and contacted law enforcement. Searchers first focused on the area near the lodge and later expanded outward, but no trace of Fran was found. Law enforcement described her as tall and slender, with auburn hair and blue eyes, and despite searches, her case faded into obscurity. There were no strong signs of an animal attack, no body, and no clear reason she would simply vanish. The chapter also connects Fran's disappearance geographically to another case nearby, Vanita Crook. Vanita was 25 years old when she disappeared in 1961 near Kitty Creek, west of Cody. She had traveled with her parents to their rural cabin for a weekend. During the trip, her parents went into the cabin while Vanita waited in the car. When they returned, she was gone. Her glasses were later found in the back seat, and a massive search began, but nothing was ever found. The author questions normal explanations. Could she have walked away? Possibly. Could she have been abducted? Maybe. But the area was extremely remote, and if someone took her, why was there no sign of struggle? If she left voluntarily, why leave behind her glasses and family? Vanita's case is one of those disappearances where the setting itself makes every theory difficult. There were no crowds, no easy escape route, and no obvious reason for her to vanish. Then comes Lynn Diane Olson, a 16-year-old girl who disappeared in 1963 near Pinedale, Wyoming. Lynn was visiting her grandparents' ranch, a remote and beautiful place with meadows, cliffs, valleys, lakes, and wilderness. She went missing from the ranch, and years later a pile of clothing was reportedly found in the area. But the clothing had been exposed for a long time and raised more questions than answers. The author notes that the region was so remote that a vehicle-based abduction seemed unlikely, and the terrain was not an easy place for someone to wander casually. There were no strong signs of a predator attack, no confirmed explanation, and no remains. And again, clothing becomes part of the mystery. Why are clothes sometimes found long after the person disappears, separated from any body, in remote places where they should have meant something? Tom Garofalo, a 28-year-old biologist with the Wyoming Fish and Game Department, disappeared in 1965 near Lozier Hill, north of Jackson. Tom was heading out for an elk hunt in an area filled with lakes and rivers and at an elevation above 7,000 feet. When he did not return, searchers found his vehicle, but not Tom. Airplanes searched from above, and ground teams worked through the region, but a new layer of snow made tracking almost impossible. Tom had not carried much equipment because the outing was expected to be short. After days of searching, officials believed his chances of survival were very low, but no body was recovered. This case is another reminder that in Wyoming, even experienced outdoorsmen can disappear in terrain they understand, and once snow covers the ground, the wilderness can erase almost every clue. Then comes Dennis Johnson, an 8-year-old boy who disappeared in 1966 near Canyon Junction in Yellowstone National Park. Dennis was traveling with his family when they stopped for a picnic near a campground. Dennis and his mother went in different directions while looking for squirrels, but when the family tried to regroup, Dennis was gone. Searchers, dogs, helicopters, and National Park Service personnel joined the operation. There were reports that Dennis may have entered a deep canyon area, and searchers worked intensely for weeks, but no trace of him was found. One of the strangest details came from Dennis's mother. She described the woods suddenly becoming silent, as if the squirrels and chipmunks had disappeared right before her son vanished. After Dennis was gone, she said the animals returned. This could be coincidence, fear, memory distortion, or nothing at all. But in a story already filled with uncertainty, it becomes difficult to forget. The case also became one where the FBI was reportedly notified, and family members later continued searching, but Dennis was never found. Then the chapter shifts toward disappearances that may involve foul play. Kathleen Peringer vanished in 1989 from Riverton, Wyoming. Authorities believe she may have left home voluntarily because there were no clear signs of a struggle, but she lived only about 30 miles from where Amy Bechtel and Wagner later disappeared, creating a strange geographic link. Amy Bechtel's case is one of the most important in the chapter. Amy was 24 years old, athletic, newly married, and living in Lander with her husband Steve. She was a runner, a climber, and by all accounts goal-oriented and responsible. On July 24, 1997, she left to run errands related to the new home she and Steve had recently bought. She was last seen at a photo shop, then planned to mark a 10K running route near the Shoshone National Forest. When she did not return, her husband contacted law enforcement. Searchers found her car near the planned route, along with her sunglasses and daily list, but Amy was gone. Attention eventually turned toward her husband, as often happens in missing spouse cases, but he cooperated, was never charged, and years later there was still no public evidence tying him to her disappearance. The author focuses on a strange clue. Amy's watch was found in a riverbed. If she had been abducted, why would the watch end up there? If she had gone into the water, where was the rest of her? If someone wanted to hide evidence, dropping a watch in a riverbed could make sense. But then why leave the car and other items? Another woman, in Wagner, disappeared in 2005 in the same broader area. Greg Oatman also went missing nearby. And the author notes that these names share similar initials or geographic links, forming another eerie cluster around Lander and the Shoshone National Forest. Then comes David Crouch, a 27-year-old man who disappeared in 1997 near Island Lake in the Bridger Wilderness while on a hiking and fishing trip. David and his friends were camped in high country at around 10,500 feet. One day, David separated from the group and could not be found. Bad weather moved in. Rain interfered with search dogs, and eventually searchers began looking in steep canyons and dense timber. The sheriff described the area as rugged, with drop-offs and thick cover, but after searching, no trace of David was ever found. Once again, the pattern returns: an experienced person in a known outdoor setting, a short separation from others, bad weather, search dogs limited by conditions, and no final evidence. By the end of the chapter, Wyoming feels different from some of the other states because many of the cases carry the possibility of abduction or foul play, especially the cases involving women. But the author repeatedly argues that the terrain makes many abduction theories difficult. These are not crowded city streets. They are remote ranches, wilderness trails, high mountain basins, and isolated roads. If someone took these people, how did they do it without being seen? If a predator attacked them, where were the remains? If they wandered off, why did searchers fail to find them? And if they died from exposure, why did the wilderness so often return no body, no gear, no final path? The curiosity loop closes with the same question it began with. What is happening in these remote places where people vanish near family, friends, horses, vehicles, camps, cabins, and marked routes, yet leave behind almost nothing? Maybe Janet Federer walked farther than anyone believed possible. Maybe Frank Norris suffered an accident that left no recoverable evidence. Maybe Fran Weaver and Vanita Crook wandered into terrain that swallowed them. Maybe Lynn Olson, Tom Garofalo, Dennis Johnson, Amy Bechtel, and David Crouch each met a different fate. But when the same elements repeat, remote wilderness, missing clothing or personal items, search dogs struggling, sudden silence, bodies never recovered, and cases quietly fading from public attention, the simple explanations start to feel incomplete. Wyoming's mountains and valleys are beautiful, but they are also vast, harsh, and full of places where a person can disappear from sight in seconds. And maybe the most unsettling part is this. In some of these cases, the wilderness may not have needed to hide the truth forever. It only needed to hide it long enough for every answer to become another question.